I'm transferring to a new school to play the final 2 seasons of my collegiate career, and I have 4 better options than my current situation, but I'm gonna have to leave my best friend behind at Wyoming. We dominated high school football together, winning a Nebraska state championship, but he's one of the reasons I'm transferring, as he hasn't been the same player in college, and all of my teammates here seem to struggle to catch the football. On top of that, I have an offensive line that looks lost, and head coach Craig Bohl doesn't trust me, so if I ever want a chance of making the NFL, I have no choice but to escape Wyoming, and Boise State would be a cool landing spot, as I could play on a blue field alongside Deestroying my former team, but they don't offer me the attention that these other schools would. As for Nebraska, they just aren't very good, which doesn't help me, and Kansas can't guarantee me the starting spot until I'm a senior, so it seems like Missouri is a no-brainer decision, especially since they play in the SEC and Brady Cook just graduated from there. In this video, I'll be playing my final 2 seasons, and my goal is to get drafted into the NFL while also making the 12-team playoffs at least once. At my first practice, I was already enjoying the fact that my receivers could hold onto the ball consistently, and I showed that I was ready for our first game against Memphis. After transferring to Missouri, I wasted no time throwing for a touchdown, and I was loving it here so far. My best receiver was Luther Burden III, who stayed for his senior year instead of declaring for the NFL draft early, and he was going to make my life 10 times easier this season. From what I've been able to see so far, my offensive line gives me plenty of time, and if needed, I can still escape the pocket and run. I don't know how this defensive tackle was able to keep up with me, but so far I was doing a great job versus Memphis, which gave me some hope for this year, and before halftime, I had already thrown for my 3rd touchdown of the game. Once we got to SEC play, it would definitely be harder, but this was nice, and I got pulled at the end of the 3rd quarter, but I finished with 4 touchdowns to win player of the game, and the next week, on the road against the Red Wolves, I was hoping we got the same type of result. However, I attempted to run the flea flicker, and my running back didn't pitch it well, so we gave up a stupid touchdown early, and by the end of the 1st quarter, we had the ball, but we were still tied with Arkansas State. The longer the game went on, the worse it seemed to get for us as we fell behind by 7, and the main issue was I hadn't earned enough of head coach Eli Drinkwitz's trust yet, so I had to run exactly what he called, and sometimes I had to be very patient for it to work, but at least he called a pretty fun offense to run, as I got to be a part of multiple option plays throughout each game this year. Once we got inside the red zone, I was hoping Luther Burden III would create separation, but he didn't, and that was the first pick I'd ever thrown at Missouri, but I was unfazed. Last year I started with 8 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, and I finished with 27 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, so I can always improve a lot. By the start of the 4th quarter, it took a while, but I helped us take the lead back, and watching our defense perform in the second half from the sidelines was highly satisfying. I put Joshua Manning in a terrible position here, but he still managed to hang on, and from that point, we were able to run down most of the remaining time, with this field goal putting us up by 2 possessions and sealing our win. I was 2-0 as a starter so far, but I needed to earn more coach trust to call plays, and that made practice very important for me this season. With the Gators next up on the schedule, I needed to be prepared, and I earned a lot of trust from head coach Eli Drinkwitz with this laser up the middle. Beating Florida would be the toughest task I've had since transferring to Missouri, but after taking a terrible sack on 1st down, I bounced back by finding tight end Brett Norfleet. I wouldn't see the ball again until there were 2 minutes left in the half though, and with the rain coming down this hard, I was pleasantly surprised when my receivers caught it, but I'm not at Wyoming anymore, so I guess that's just a new luxury that I'll need to adjust to. Now that I had a solid supporting cast around me, I was having a blast squeezing it into tight holes, and to end the 2nd quarter, I sensed that the blitz was coming, so I immediately rolled out to the right and did my best to outrun every single defender on the field. We had a lead, but we needed to hold on to it, and it took us a bit, but after handing it off to Tavoris Jones 3 times, he fell in. Then our defense forced a huge interception, so we went up by even more, and since things were going really well for me, I don't want to talk about this interception. The important thing was we were still up by 2 possessions, and Luther Burden III was fighting for extra yards, so after Jamarian Wayne's wet body slipped right by the Gators' corner, we were able to officially seal the game, and the following week, we were playing winless Hawaii, so it should be cake. I was taking some pretty rough hits early on while running the option, so I was glad I was able to stay in the game, but on this play, I got reminded of what it was like at Wyoming, and right after this, we faced SEC opponents again, taking on Vanderbilt, so I needed to get in a groove to be ready for that game. This was the biggest run of my collegiate career, and I wish I was faster, but at least I still got credit for a touchdown. I'd rather act like I didn't get railed on the following possession, which resulted in a fumble, and obviously, I did struggle for portions of this game, but I also continued to score touchdowns, so I felt like I was ready for Vandy, and we were also still undefeated this season, so transferring had to be the best decision I've ever made. I didn't have enough of my coach's trust though, so in order to be able to flip the plays and eventually call my own, I had to keep showing out in practice, which I did, and I also got us into the end zone on our first drive against Vanderbilt with this throw, but unfortunately, we'd only score another 7 in the first half due to some struggles, and the worst part was on the final Hail Mary of the 2nd quarter, we could have had a chance to tie it, but instead, I added an interception to my stat sheet. It wasn't the end of the world because I persevered and and eventually got us the lead, but the main reason for our success was our defense figured out how to stop AJ Swan in the second half, and then they punted instead of going for it, so that meant that all we had to do was get one more first down to seal it, and we barely got it here, but that's all that matters as we got the win, and that actually got us ranked for the first time, but now we were going to be challenged for the top spot in the SEC. I had to play at Georgia, which was the toughest defense I've ever faced, and I was struggling immensely for the first time since I transferred from Wyoming. Sanford Stadium was so loud I thought my running back called for it here, which resulted in a turnover, and after a holding call, we were stuck on a long 3rd and 20, which we were never going to convert. It was a rough first quarter, and even though we finally scored, approaching halftime, it was 20-7, so we needed more, and with about 30 seconds left in the half, Georgia ran cover 2, leaving the middle of the field wide open, but for whatever reason, my coach forced me to run a halfback toss as time ticked down, and after taking a sack, all I could do at the end of the half was throw up a Hail Mary, which just resulted in my first pick of the game. I wish I had earned enough of my coach's trust to call my own plays because I think it could have been much closer, but instead, I was forced to hand it off on 3rd downs where we didn't do anything, and at the very end of the game, I sensed the pressure, so I ran for a touchdown, but it was too late, and this was the worst stat line I had put up all year, but I don't think this loss will ruin our season. We still have a shot at making the 12-team playoff, but we have to take down 5-1 Mississippi State on the road, and I was ready to help us bounce back. Due to my patience, I was able to find senior receiver Jamarian Wayne streaking wide open down the field for 6, and from there, I just continued to dominate. However, Mississippi State's offense was able to keep up with us, so it was far from over, and with about 4 minutes remaining, it was crucial that we scored, so Tavorius Jones taking it in was big. After that, all I could do was watch from the sidelines as my defense got a critical stop, and we had secured another road win in the SEC where I was able to throw for 264 yards. I had to face number 13 Houston next, which was going to be extremely tough, and if we were going to beat the number 13 team in the country, we couldn't have drops like this, and we also couldn't afford to continue to fall just short of the first down marker. To be honest, we shouldn't have been in this game, but our defense forced a big interception, and that's what led to me throwing the game-tying touchdown. However, Houston went down to score again, and then this safety made an incredible play on the ball, so we went into the half trailing by 10, and it seemed like ever since we started facing real competition, I was struggling a bit, which was not good because I only had a season and a half left of college eligibility. I still wanted to make the NFL, even if I was a late round draft pick, and with about 30 seconds left, I'd throw for my 3rd touchdown of the day, but we were still behind by 2 possessions, and I watched as we didn't get the onside kick, so we fell to 6-2 this season, and we couldn't lose any of our last 4, so I upgraded my speed in Excel, and it was time to finish the year strong. I still believe we can make the playoffs, even if we aren't ranked right now, because we could finish as a 10-2 SEC team, but that would entail beating the last 4 opponents on our schedule, and I would have had the first down here, but the South Carolina defender almost tipped the ball into an interception. I figured we would have just taken the field goal from there, but Eli Drinkwitz was calling the game aggressively, and it paid off as we increased our lead to 14 points. By the end of the first half, it seemed like this one was already over after I threw for a touchdown to tight end Brett Norfleet, and I was starting to feel myself a bit. Under pressure, I put this ball perfectly on the money to Luther Burden III for 53 yards, so we were cruising to our 7th win of the year, and I just continued to add on touchdowns to my stat line. After how I played against Houston, this was much needed, and I was hoping some NFL scouts were starting to take notice because we were back in the top 25, and there was no way we could lose to Tennessee now. Our season needed to end strong, and to start the second quarter, I thread the needle up the middle for my 2nd touchdown, and from there, it just continued to get better. It wasn't even halftime yet, and I had already run in for my 4th score of the day, so after what I did to South Carolina and then this, I knew I would start getting a little NFL interest. What would really make or break my career though was how I finished the year, so this couldn't be my last amazing performance, and we were actually leading our division in the SEC. This was the best possible way to start the game against my favorite team Kentucky as I hooked up with junior tight end Brett Norfleet for a 60-yard gain, and for the opening drive, he was my go-to guy catching this touchdown. It wasn't snowing too hard, but it got Joshua Manning just wet enough to slip away from the Kentucky defender, and from there, he'd take it to the house. So without a shadow of a doubt, we were playing the best football we had played all year, and I threw for my 4th touchdown before halftime for the 2nd week in a row. It felt like it was already over, and in the end, we would beat Kentucky at Kroger Field by 18 points. I had really elevated my level of play, and throughout the year, I had upgraded so much, so I was confident going into our game against Texas A&M, but I shouldn't have been. All we had to do was win to make the SEC championship, but the Aggies were extremely prepared for us because they were also playing for a playoff spot, so with a minute left in the first half, we were trailing 27-7 and we had to score. The best option I had was to chuck up a 50-50 ball to Luther Burden III, who was able to come down with it, and to finish the second quarter, we were within 13 points, so we were back in it, and the comeback continued to open up the second half. Our punt returner even took one for a touchdown, so Texas A&M had collapsed, but they took their lead back with this score, score, and I had to respond, so I made sure we were able to. The issue was they had enough time to get into field goal range, but our defense forced a massive interception, so we were able to take the Aggies into overtime, but my coach called 3 straight running plays and then pulled me off the field on 4th down, so Texas A&M could win with a touchdown, and this hurt to watch because this would knock us out of the playoffs and the SEC championship as well. Even though I played almost perfectly, my junior year didn't end the way I wanted, and I was ready to start my senior season already, but I had to play the Outback Bowl first against 8-4 Michigan State. We were the better team, so we basically doubled their score, and it was a good ending to the year, but if I was going to have the best senior season possible, I needed to put the work in this offseason, and since that's all I did, I had big goals for this year, especially since I just got my first NIL deal from today's video sponsor, Prize Picks. If you somehow still don't know what Prize Picks is, you simply pick higher or lower on their player projections, and this week I am fading the Iowa offense again because it worked out well for me the last time, while also trusting their defense to pick off Drew Aller. If you add more players, you can win up to 25x your money, but I'm sticking with these two and putting in 25 to hopefully win 75. I can also get you a deposit match up to $100 on Prize Picks, so use promo code BOARD when you sign up and they'll match it up to $100, assuming you reside in one of the 31 states they're available in. And now let's see how my senior year plays out. Surprisingly, I was projected to be in the Heisman race, and we were actually ranked 12th in the first AP poll. My first game of my senior season was against number 8 Georgia, and their defense was insane, but that wasn't going to stop me from performing at the highest level. I had a lot of eyes watching me since I was in the Heisman race, so I knew I had to show out, and I was never known for being a runner, but after being in this system for a year already, I was getting better and becoming more evasive, so I was starting to get on a bit of a roll, and I would follow it up with one of my best plays yet as I made an amazing throw under pressure to Joshua Manning. Since Luther Burton III graduated and went on to the NFL, I had to find a new top target, and I was spreading it around to about everybody on the team, but I also spread it around to players on Georgia as well in the process. I don't know what I was thinking here, but I didn't place the ball the way I wanted to, and I had to track down this corner to bring him down. That allowed the Bulldogs to get it back within a possession, but I had to make up for my mistake, and I did just that. Thankfully, Georgia's defense wasn't able to stop the run at the end, so we would win, and besides that pick, I thought I did really well. My next matchup was against the Citadel, an FCS school, so it was easy, and it was a great opportunity for me to pad my stats. Approaching halftime, I had already thrown for 3 touchdowns, and then I was able to rush for one as well, going 18 yards on the ground, so it was clear that I would be pulled from the game sooner rather than later, but I made sure to continue to run it up before my coach decided enough was enough. I didn't finish with many yards, but I had 6 touchdowns, and we were up to number 7 in the polls. My first road game of the season was at Wisconsin, but I was thankful to be playing a Big Ten West team instead of somebody like Ohio State or Michigan, because no matter how well they played us, it wouldn't be as tough, but I should probably show them a little bit of respect considering they picked me off in the red zone. It was actually a close game approaching halftime until I slung it 30 yards to Jamarian Wayne, and after my defense forced an interception, I followed it up with another touchdown to my tight end. If anybody was standing out as my number 1 target so far, it was probably him, and things were going so well until I took this rough sack in the 4th quarter, which would put me out for the rest of the game, but at that point, it was pretty much over already, and we were still undefeated. But this year, we had to play South Carolina on the road, and they had gotten much better, so with a couple minutes left in the half, we were only able to score once, and part of that also had to do with this rough play calling. We ended up falling behind by 3, and even though I hadn't made any mistakes, we were not doing well, so something had to change, and the second I saw cover 2, I went straight to Mekhi Miller, who would take it to the crib for 6. I thought I was going to find him over the top for another touchdown, but I underthrew this ball into an interception, so unfortunately, by the time I got us into the end zone again, there were only 2 minutes left, and the onside kick recovery did not go our way, so even though we'd force a stop, there would be almost no time, and I was hoping we could get to at least midfield to try a Hail Mary, but South Carolina was ready, which meant I finished the game with 2 interceptions, and that dropped me down to 5th in the Heisman race, so I worked even harder during practice to get back in a groove. I can't believe Vanderbilt is ranked 12th, but since they are, this matchup could decide whether we make the playoffs or not, and with implications that high as a senior, I knew I needed to step up to help us win. On 4th and goal, the Commodores thought they had us stopped, but I got the pitch off just in time, and to end the first half, I worked so hard to get us into a position where we could put up even more points on Vanderbilt, but their safety anticipated my read correctly to prevent that from happening, and the rest of the game, I just let my teammates do all of the work. Jamal Roberts was by far our best player today, and we improved to 4-1 this season, so things seem to be trending back upward, and with Appalachian State up next, we should get another win, but this game did not go the way that anybody thought it would. We went up 14-3 with a minute left in the half, but then we were held scoreless throughout the entire 3rd quarter, and after finally getting us inside the red zone again, I floated the ball straight to the Mountaineers defender, so it's a good thing that my defense was clutch, but we should have never been in such a close one with Appalachian State State, and I didn't deserve player of the game, but somehow I was still in the Heisman race, and as of right now, we were projected to be a playoff team. I had to face an HBCU next, and I never enjoy playing when it's dumping rain, but since we were taking on Grambling State, that shouldn't be a problem, and this might be the most impressive running play of my career. I made 3 guys look silly, and after I broke free, there wasn't anybody close enough to stop me from scoring 6, so after struggling in 2 of my last 3 games, it was nice to be dominating again, and with a minute left in the first half, I was 12 for 13 with 3 touchdowns on the day. This is what I needed to win the Heisman Trophy, and I got pulled after that, but I still did very well, so we thank Grambling State for coming out here, and we were ready to return to SEC play, where we could still take our division, but we had to win out. I was playing at the swamp in the rain, so the conditions and atmosphere were far from ideal, and by the end of the first quarter, even though we put together a couple of decent drives, we had no points, so that was frustrating, but what was worse was getting blown up hard by the Florida cornerback, and I don't know how I was still out there after that play, but I made something out of this, so going into the second half, I thought we'd have a lead, but that just wasn't the case. In fact, with a couple minutes left in the third quarter, we were trailing by 7 until I threw this touchdown, and I'm not sure how my tight end was able to hold on to this ball, but I'm very thankful that he did. It led to us marching down the field, and I tried to finish it off by taking it in myself, but since I got stopped short, I had to make sure it didn't happen again, and unfortunately, the Gators responded back, so we were all tied up at 21, and I wanted to make sure that this was the final drive of the game. With about 30 seconds remaining though, I got baited by a safety for an interception, and Florida would go down to win on a field goal, so it felt like the season was over, but remember, 12 teams make the playoffs, and I'm also third in the Heisman race, so there was still a lot to play for, and I was going to make sure I got into the NFL. If we win these final 4 games, I think we will still make the college football playoffs, but we have to take on LSU, and my first touchdown of the game came super early on with this laser straight to Brett Norfleet. The Tigers were 3-4, so they weren't as good as they've been in prior seasons, and I threw for 3 touchdowns in the first half alone. I needed to prove that I was a real contender for the Heisman, and I felt like plays like this did that, but then I'd make a stupid decision like turning the ball over on 4th and 8 for no reason, and even though we'd still get the win, each interception hurts my Heisman odds. Versus Tennessee, I also had a good start in this one, finding Joshua Manning for a touchdown, and I was starting to use my legs a bit more, making myself a dual threat, which would separate me from a lot of quarterbacks in this class. The ultimate goal was still making the NFL, and I felt like I should have been on more teams' radars, but my lack of decisiveness when nothing gets open is one of my biggest flaws, and that's the reason we failed to convert this 4th and goal to end the first half. It wasn't the end of the world since Joshua Manning was having himself a day, but if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have beaten Tennessee. In the end, we ended up winning by 14, and after destroying the Volunteer defense, I had earned enough of my coach's trust. This was the wildest start I'd ever experienced in a game, as I found Daniel Blood with this pass, and he was clearly out for blood today after seeing how hard he stiff-armed that dude to score a touchdown. Also, now that Eli Drinkwitz trusted me enough to call some of my own plays, I was so much better, because whenever he wanted to do something stupid like run the ball, I'd switch it up, and I was still trying to win the Heisman while getting us into the playoffs, so every play was so important, especially with only 2 games left, and I felt like I had been so lucky in this one. The Kentucky cornerbacks never seemed to be in the right position, which really benefited my stat line, and I honestly wish the Wildcats could have at least attempted to keep up with our offense, because I would have been able to stay in the game longer, but after I saw the terrible positioning of the safety, I knew I could throw for another one before getting pulled. Wide receiver Mickey Miller was just faster than every DB on this field, and that's when my coach decided I'd done enough, or at least I thought. He knew I was gunning for the Heisman, so he let me stay in the game, and that was so nice of him because I was able to get another touchdown with this dot. After that though, he decided to have some sportsmanship, but I wasn't complaining because I threw for 8 touchdowns and my Heisman dreams were so close to being a reality. My final game of my college career, at least in the regular season, was on the road at Texas A&M, and recently it seemed like I couldn't do anything wrong. Even when I stumbled due to running into my own guy, I turned it into a 35-yard completion down the field, and being able to call my own plays was a cheat code until I threw this interception. We were losing to the Aggies already, and on 4th and 3 we couldn't pick it up, so we fell behind by 14, and I was getting flashbacks to how last season ended. I realized I could no longer care about winning the Heisman for myself, but instead just getting my team the win so we could make the playoffs, and this explosive 86-yard play to end the first half was insane. The problem was, by the time I'd get the ball back again, we were down by 14, and these cornerbacks were so much better than Kentucky's as they clamped our receivers up, and if we wanted to win this game, the comeback had to start now because time was not going to be on our side. I'd hand this one off so we could score a touchdown, and thankfully our defense held the Aggies so we got the ball back again, but we still had a long way to go, and just like last week, Mickey Miller ended up being the receiver that pulled off miracles. I watched from the sidelines as we just needed to get one more stop on Texas A&M A&M, and on 3rd and 13, after we failed to hold them on their last third down, we got a huge interception, so we had a chance, and you best believe that without any hesitation at all, I called for verticals. We had actually completed the comeback, but Texas A&M scored a touchdown in 2 plays, so we were down 7 again with a minute left, and the result flashed before my eyes as I got hit and the Aggie defensive end almost picked it off. This could be a career-defining moment as every scout in the country was tuned in, and with about 10 seconds left, I had an open receiver, but Daniel Blood dropped it. That was our chance to tie it back up because now the Texas A&M defense was prepared for that, and I would get one final heave attempt to the end zone, but none of my guys turned around to attempt to catch it, so all of the Missouri fans were devastated, and Texas A&M might have ruined our season again because going into conference championship week, we were ranked around 13. My season stats were better than last year, but it wasn't enough to win the Heisman Trophy, and thankfully we did sneak in with the final spot. I made the college football playoffs, and this is my senior year, so even though we're a 12 seed, I hope we can pull off some upsets. As a junior, I remember losing to Houston, so I needed to redeem myself, and by the way I was playing so far, that seemed like a reality. They were a Big 12 team now, but I didn't fear them like other programs, and maybe I should have because all of my success went out the window the second I turned it over. I tried to get over there to bring him down, but I just got embarrassed even more instead, and if you're wondering why I didn't win the Heisman, I feel like these past few passing attempts make it clear. We were fortunate to only be down 7 with a minute left in the half, and even though I'd been stinking it up, I had no fear of slinging it, especially to Mickey Miller. Being the underdog was fun because there was no expectations or pressure on me, and that meant going for it on 4th and 3 when we should have just punted, which would have been a great decision if I didn't end this drive with another interception. It was so embarrassing how much I was crumbling under pressure, and that might cause me to not get drafted at all, so we had to escape with a win, and while trying to evade the pressure and throw it away, for some reason I pump faked instead, turning it over again. This was the worst performance of my career, so it's a good thing my defense forced a fumble, and honestly, at this point, I don't even want to talk about it or think about what's happening. I did not deserve to be a quarterback in the playoffs, and I was honestly expecting to get benched, but thankfully, after a while, my defense was somehow able to hold Houston again, and their kicker missed another field goal, so it was still 14-14, and we could actually win. Since I was so atrocious at throwing the ball today, having my worst career game ever, I decided it was best if I tried running instead, and this spin move caught the entire stadium completely off guard. Obviously, I didn't deserve to be in this game, but since we still had a chance, I was trying my best and I only used my legs for this entire drive. I figured we'd settle for 3, but Tavoris Jones took it in, and we were moving on to the next round where we would be facing off against the 4-seeded Seminoles. I had somehow made it into the quarterfinals of the college football playoffs, and I don't know how, but all that mattered was we were here, and I continued where I left off by having success on the ground, going for 46 yards, and then I rolled out to throw a touchdown pass to Brett Norfleet. However, I couldn't just run around forever without screwing that up as well, and I gifted Florida State great field positioning, so they'd go on to score a touchdown from that, and I turned it over the next time we got into the red zone. This one was starting to feel just like the Houston game, and the problem with that is Florida State's defense is even better than the Cougars with crushing hits like this. It was very difficult to move the ball when nobody was on the same page, but on 4th and 7, I wanted to run that play back, and every Missouri fan was very thankful that we did, because that would lead to the touchdown that gave us a 1-point lead, and I also broke Drew Lock's school record in the process. Just like our last one, this game was a defensive battle, and I thought I was going to pick up the first on 4th down here, but I was stopped short. If our defense wasn't playing so well, we would not be in this position, but I couldn't screw it up now, and on this jet sweep, Mickey Miller, the hero of our season, took it almost 20 yards himself to the house, but Florida State wouldn't go away as they scored a touchdown, and AJ Duffy would take in the 2-point conversion. That meant I would need to clutch up and make this the final drive of the game, and I was not going out after making it this far. I had struggled for a while, but now it was time for me to show off to the NFL scouts, and with Jordan Harris holding onto this ball up the middle, we were in the exact position we needed. I watched as we kicked the go-ahead field goal, but on the final play when we should have just dropped everybody back, I witnessed the most heartbreaking moment of my life with the Seminoles scoring. My college career was completely over, and Florida State actually went on to win it all. Despite the rough ending to my senior season, I got drafted, and I actually went in the 2nd round with the 35th pick. The Denver Broncos were taking a shot on me, and for a 4-star out of Nebraska, I think I had a pretty neat collegiate story and journey.